Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings. Thanks for joining in. Today I'm going to tie you a pattern that you may have never heard of or seen. It's called a Sedge Hog Variant. A sedge is the English word that we call caddises. This is very, very popular fly in the Scandinavian countries because they have what are called the traveling sedges. These are large sedges that hatch out in their large lakes and ponds. And these sedges have a habit, once they emerge, they don't fly to the shore. They kind of fly and skip and flutter across the water, and you can imagine it drives the fish nuts. This type of fly, the traveling sedge, is also common in the British Columbia ponds and lakes. I didn't tie this so much to imitate our caddis flies, although you can tie this. This is a size 8 hook. You can tie it all the way down to a 14. This is a great fly for a hopper-dropper combo. It's virtually unsinkable. It's also a great fly for very active retrieves. You can strip this, pull it underwater, flip it. You can do anything, give this thing plenty of motion. And you're not restricted. This is natural whitetail. You're not restricted to that color. You can use any spinning deer hair. This is bleached deer hair. Yellow, this is a combination of fluorescent green and yellow, so you can play with this and do a lot of different things. Let's talk about hair for a little bit. On mammals, there's 3 types of hairs. There are guard hairs. Guard hairs are solid. They do not flare under thread pressure. Think about a squirrel tail as a guard hair. There's also underfur, which on a hare's mask, we use a lot of underfur for dubbing. It's very soft. Then there are hollow hairs. Hollow hairs, for example, on elk, moose, deer. Hollow hairs, the tips are solid, but if you look at this waviness of the hair here, this indicates that that hair is hollow, and it flares and spins very well. Think of a hair follicle as a soda straw filled with cells of various sizes that have air bubbles in them. If the soda straw itself, the walls are thick and the bubbles are small, that hair does not flare well under pressure. Think like bull elk hair. That's why we use it for wings, like on a elk hair caddis. We don't want that hair to flare. Next, you have something like cow elk. The outer wall's a little thinner, the bubbles are a little bigger. It will flare a little bit. Yearling elk will flare a little bit more. Deer hair flares the most because the outer wall is very thin and the bubbles inside are very large. So when you're looking, and this is regular natural whitetail hair, you can also use spinning deer hair. The spinning deer hair comes from the flanks, the sides of the animal, and it's best for this. You do want to be aware, however, depending on the size of the hook you're using, because the tips are solid, they do not flare. And you want hair that has tips that are short enough that you're still tying into that hollow hair section, or you won't get the hair to flare. Okay? So I'm using GSP 100 thread. You do not want to use smaller than 100 when you're flaring hair. Even with 100, I can put enough pressure on this hair to slice it right off of the hook. But if you get into the smaller GSP thread, you're going to have a hard time securing this hair without cutting it off. So 100 denier is my minimum. This is white. Might as well get ready to tie here. So I'm going to be using some bleached deer hair. Take a piece off. It's about pencil width, wooden pencil. So we make sure we clean that well, get all the underfur, short hairs out of it. We want our tail to be about hook gap length. We also want to make sure we're not in the tips. We want to be in the hollow part of the hair so it flares. Pull down, flare. Keep your thread wraps vertical to the hook shank. If you start tilting your thread wraps, you're going to start tying down some of this hair. Going to trim off the top hairs. We don't need these. Now here's a trick I'll share with you. This will never be tight because the hair is between the hook shank and the thread. So to keep this material from spinning later, you need to wrap hook against the bare hook shank. I'm going to bring my thread up to the front of this, grab these hollow shafts, pull them down, make a couple of tight thread wraps in front of that bunch. That will secure that hair from spinning later. Little tip from Dave. You're welcome. And we're going to just continue to build this body with patches of hair. It's a little tedious, but it's really not that time consuming. And only use sizes of hair that you can control. Don't use overly large bunches. This next bunch is going to be a little longer. We'll start building the back of this fly. Again, 2 slack wraps of thread, one on top of each other. Hold the material firmly, pull down, flare. A couple of thread wraps through it. We compress this material quite a little bit, so the bunch I started out with actually takes very, very little room on the hook shank itself. We don't need the hair on top. Trim that. Once again, bring your thread up to the front. Pull your hairs back and out of the way. A couple of good tight thread wraps on the hook shank.
Curved caddis or what am I trying to say? It's got to be caddis.
Make sure that the hair is well cleaned. You don't have any underfur in there. That will inhibit the flaring and will not allow you to tighten the thread down as much as you'd like to. Nice and clean. Put this right in front of the previous bunch. You see I wiggle my thread back and forth a little bit so I don't trap previous hair. Also, as I'm going through the hair, kind of weave it side to side a little. All right, I'm just going to use, you can use a hair packer if you want, but you'll find out that you're not going to pack this hair very much. If you've done as I've instructed, it's on there so tight you really can't move it much. I'm just trying to find my hook eye here.
2 weeks straight.
Pull the hair back, bring your thread forward. Again, several tight thread wraps at the front to hold everybody down. Now, I have found whip finishing like this, if I keep the barrel of my whip finisher parallel to the hook shank, I don't capture hair like that. Tighten that down. I'm not sure I caught that. All right, before we trim this, I'd like to take a toothbrush like this, kind of comb the hairs out, particularly underneath the hook shank, get everybody straight, makes the trimming process a little neater. Also takes out any short hairs, anything like that, like so. All right, the first cut's going to be flat across the bottom. You want to make that cut about 1/3 of the way up from the hook shank, so about 1/3 of a hook gap. Find your hook back here, make one straight cut, like that, across the bottom. We're going to taper this bottom so at the front of the fly, the head underneath is a little larger. We're going to taper it towards the back. This allows you to fish this actively, makes it harder to pull under. Sides, trim this up a little bit. You do not need to spend a lot of time trimming this fly. Now we're going to put kind of a muddler type of head on it. Just use the eye of the hook as your guide for your angle. Lay your scissors up there, like so. Okay, see if I have any other hairs that need some attention. And then finally, I'm going to take just a lighter and singe these hair butts. That helps to close them up. You do not want to set this fly on fire. You just want to singe it a little bit. So just a stroke across the bottom, on the side, a little bit on the head, And you can either use the edge of your scissors to brush off the soot. I just use a soft toothbrush, brush that soot off. There you have the hedgehog. Again, it can be tied from size 8 all the way down to 14. It is not a difficult fly to tie, a little time consuming, but you will learn how to flare deer hair and keep it tight on the hook. As always, thanks for joining in. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. We'll see you next time.